How fitting that the movie about the Academy Awards of protests is likely going to be headed to the Academy Awards itself. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about Netflix's 2020 historical legal drama, The Trial of the Chicago 7. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. The Trial of the Chicago 7 stars Mark Rylance, Eddie Redmayne, and Sacha Baron Cohen, and was directed by Aaron Sorkin. Based on the real-life 1969 Chicago 7 trial, it tells the story of a group of anti-Vietnam War protesters charged with inciting the riots that occurred during the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. History repeats itself. I know that sounds like such a cliche, but to an extent, it's very true. Sometimes this repetition's in core concept alone. The central issue's familiar, or maybe the lesson learned is the same. Other times, the repetition can be more literal, taking on an eerie sense of déjà vu. And it's that latter case that often sets up for an ideal movie-making situation. These are the movies that are frequently tagged with adjectives like timely, or relevant, or pertinent. They tell the story of a historical event, or situation, or person, but allow the audience to make the connection to a current event, situation, or person. And because history repeats itself, films like that often become relevant again years later, with a whole new audience being able to draw parallels to a new set of current events. Now, this concept that history repeats itself can feel very disenchanting at times, especially when the lessons learned the first time around aren't applied in subsequent scenarios. But the benefit is that we can learn from the past. That's why looking at history is so important for the present and the future. It helps prevent us from being doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. That obviously requires a willingness to apply lessons learned in the past to the present, but it also requires something else: exposure to history. And that's where movies like The Trial of the Chicago 7 really come into play. They provide the entertainment that moviegoers are looking for, and some people might just stop there, and that's fine, but they also might introduce people to a piece of history that they didn't know about before. And this film is a prime example of that for me. I really didn't know anything about the Chicago 7. I knew a little bit about the protests outside the 1968 Democratic National Convention and the ensuing police riot, and I had heard the name the Chicago 7, but I didn't know who they were or really any of the post-incident events. So just from a story standpoint, I found this to be a very interesting movie. And it is that. A movie, a fictionalized account of some real events and people. But again, it's an important thing because it makes people aware of something they might not have been aware of before. Personally, after the movie ended, I immediately started looking into the actual history of this, of the protest and the police response, of the trial and all the people involved, of the aftermath and impact it all had. I know that not everybody watching the movie will go beyond just watching it, and again, that's fine. And not everybody who does is gonna get sucked into reading about it for hours like I did, but it is gonna make some people look into it. And so I think even just that alone is a sign of success for a movie like this. So I know I just spent a lot of time talking about history and historical relevancy in movies. I mean, a documentary about the Chicago 7 could have achieved a lot of what I've already talked about, right? But The Trial of the Chicago 7 goes beyond that and reaches a much wider audience because it's not packaged as a history lesson. First and foremost, it's a movie. It's a piece of entertainment. And entertaining it is. Aaron Sorkin just has the knack for this type of thing. This is only the second movie he's directed, but his writing has been honed over nearly 3 decades, and is just a perfect fit here. This movie is primarily a courtroom drama. There are definitely moments of out-of-court action, but the vast majority of the movie focuses on characters sitting around and talking. And that has the potential to be very boring to watch. Personally, I love courtroom dramas, but I know they're not everybody's thing. So that's where Sorkin's script comes into play. He's known for writing fantastic dialogue and editing cues, for having believable character interactions that are still incredibly entertaining. It's snappy and witty and fast-paced, but never feels forced or unnatural. And here with this movie, he was able to bring a lot of levity without making light of the situation or sacrificing the gravitas of it all. An interesting story and great writing are both important for this movie, but it's the performances that really bring it all together. This movie's got a big cast. There are certainly a few smaller roles and secondary characters, but there are a remarkable number of what I would consider to be main characters. A lot of time is spent focusing on a lot of different people. But small role or large, across the board, the performances here are excellent. This is one of those movies where I could truly talk about each of these performances at length. I won't, for brevity's sake, but I honestly feel bad only talking about some of the highlights. One that I want to mention, partly because I don't think his performance is going to get talked about much in other reviews, is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Now, I'll admit, I've been a fan of his since the Angels in the Outfield days, but I think he was really good here. We don't spend a lot of time with him, and it's a bit of a thankless role because he's the lead prosecutor and technically an antagonist in the story, but I thought he brought some interesting nuance and internal conflict to the character. Mark Rylance as the defense attorney for the Chicago 7 was also incredibly good and has some great classic courtroom drama moments. And then the Chicago 7, or 8, were all good too. Cohen, Redmayne, and Abdul-Mateen were the standouts there for me, but again, I was so impressed with the performances across the board, and across the courtroom. Much like that 1968 protest in Grant Park was a convergence of many different groups of people fighting for the same cause, this movie is a convergence of many different elements, resulting in a gripping film. Everything from the performances, to the writing, to the editing, to the real-life event on which it's based contribute to this. Again, courtroom dramas aren't everybody's thing. They can get a little slow or dry at times, but that's absolutely not the case here. This is such a well-paced, well-put-together movie. It's over 2 hours long, and mostly consists of characters sitting around talking, yet it feels like it flies by. It's surprisingly intense. That's certainly the case for the protest and police clash sequences, but also for the trial, and even the trial prep. There's this sequence in the third act where the defense is prepping with a mock cross-examination, and it was easily the most intense sequence of this movie for me. It cut between this emotional and charged mock cross-examination and flashbacks of the clash with police. Both parts of that had their inherent intenseness, but then it was further intercut with real footage of the protests and police riot. And the pacing and editing and ramping up of this sequence was just unexpectedly visceral. I could feel it all building up in my chest, and it was just so effective leading into the final part of the movie. Really, the whole movie's effective. Effective as a piece of entertainment, as a means of bringing a true story to a potentially new audience, and as a reminder that history repeats itself, and we need to learn from the past to deal with the present so we can affect change in the future. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has got to be the performances. Strong, believable performances can really make or break a courtroom drama, and really all of the performances here help to make this one. This movie's essentially got an ensemble cast. It doesn't really feel like that within the construct of the story, considering more than half the characters are the defendants, but it still means that there are a lot of characters that are gonna be on screen for most of the movie. And in a movie like this, that means they're going to be talking and interacting with each other a lot. So whether we're talking about the defendants, the lawyers, the judge, or even the secondary characters, everybody had to be on top of their game to make it work as this cohesive thing. And they were. Rylance and Gordon-Levitt both delivered fantastic, but quite different performances as the defense attorney and lead prosecutor, respectively. I also thought Abdul-Mateen and Redmayne gave particularly good performances, but perhaps most surprising to me was Sacha Baron Cohen. He's best known for his over-the-top comedy, but he delivered an unexpectedly reserved performance here, though still quite comedic. The second pro is the writing. Aaron Sorkin just knows how to write entertaining and engaging dialogue. It comes at you quickly, and there's a lot of it, but none of it feels wasted or extraneous. It's just solidly entertaining. And of course, there's more to a script than just dialogue. There's story and pacing and editing cues and all sorts of stuff. Sorkin has a very unique and identifiable style. I mean, you can always tell when you're watching a movie he wrote. Here, he not only wrote it, but he directed it too. So that script and his writing really came through in the finished product, even more so than usual. Pro number 3 is how gripping this movie was. Really good courtroom dramas can be gripping. They can be tense and suspenseful and inspiring. I'm a fan of courtroom dramas in general, but even I can admit that most of them don't have that grandiose edge-of-your-seat effect. Most films in the genre tend to drag a bit. They have slow, dry sections, or maybe some dull out-of-court scenes. But that's really not the case with this movie. It moves. It flies by in what feels like a fraction of its actual runtime. Maybe it's partly because I wasn't familiar with the case and didn't already know the outcome, but I found this film to be very compelling. And that, combined with the pacing, editing, and a whole slew of other factors, made for an exciting movie. On the con side, I don't have any major issues, so it's really only minor nitpicks. There are a few moments that could be considered cheesy or a bit over-sentimental, but I didn't really mind them. I could just tell when they were coming and exactly what would happen with them. And also, with such a big cast, some of the more minor roles felt a little underdeveloped, understandably. For instance, 2 of the Chicago 7 didn't really have much to do and kind of felt like they were mostly used as a vehicle for some quippy one-liners. I can't be too frustrated by it though, because it seems like the real-life counterparts of these characters had equally minor contributions during the actual trial. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give The Trial of the Chicago 7 4.5 out of 5 paws. Even though I like most things Aaron Sorkin's been involved with, and I tend to like courtroom dramas, for some reason, I didn't expect to like this one as much as I did. But it's a really strong, fast-paced, entertaining film, and I think it might actually be my favorite of the year so far. I would recommend The Trial of the Chicago 7 to most people. It's one of those movies that, because of its relevancy, I think everybody should see. But I do truly think that most people will get something out of it. Fans of courtroom dramas will definitely like it. And if you enjoy Aaron Sorkin's work, this is a pretty typical movie for him. So I think you'll enjoy this one too. And if you're interested in history, but maybe don't know much about the Chicago 7 or the Democratic National Convention protests in 1968, this will be an interesting fictionalized account of events that'll probably inspire you to dig into the real history after you watch it, like it did to me. If you liked The Trial of the Chicago 7, I would recommend Medium Cool. It's another movie centered around the '68 DNC protest and approaches it all from a very unique media-based position. It's a narrative film with a script and fictional characters and everything, but it was largely shot in a documentary style in the midst of the protest and police riot. So the actors are sometimes truly in the thick of it, running from tear gas and trying to avoid getting hit by batons alongside actual protesters. If you enjoyed Aaron Sorkin's style, I would definitely recommend Molly's Game. It was his directorial debut and another film that he also wrote, featuring some really strong performances and that same entertaining, fast-paced quality. And if you're interested in another really gripping courtroom drama, you've got to watch 12 Angry Men. It's another visceral, dialogue-heavy film with a large cast, but is fairly unique within the genre in the sense that it takes place almost entirely in the jury deliberation room rather than the courtroom itself. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen The Trial of the Chicago 7? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite courtroom drama that's about a real case? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.